Number 2. The Council Documents, a mix of traditional faith and modern theology. Even those too who are convinced of the dogmatic integrity and continuity of the Council documents would have to notice that certain expressions and formulations can be found in various texts which are capable of being interpreted and applied in the sense of interreligious dialogue as it was practiced after the Council, and which texts were repeatedly quoted until finally their hidden intentions became clear for all to see at an event like that of Assisi. For example, the guiding principle of the declaration Nostra Aetate 1:1 regarding the role of the Church. Quote, "In her task of fostering unity and love among men, and even among nations, she gives primary consideration in this document to what human beings have in common and to what promotes fellowship among them." End quote. This concerns the relationship of the Church to non-Christian religions. It sounds like a prelude to Assisi. As a second example, from Gaudium et Spes 78. Quote, "Peace on earth, which flows from love of one's neighbor, symbolizes and derives from the peace of Christ, who proceeds from God the Father. Christ, the Word made flesh, the Prince of Peace, reconciled all men to God by the cross, and, restoring the unity of all in one people and one body, he abolished hatred in his own flesh. Having been lifted up through his resurrection, he poured forth the Spirit of love into the hearts of men. Therefore, all Christians are earnestly to speak the truth in love," Ephesians 4:15, "and join with all peace-loving men in pleading for peace and trying to bring it about." Flannery, Documents of Vatican II, page 987, end quote. Does the unity of all in one people and one body mean the unity of the Church and humanity? Have peace-loving men not united in Assisi in pleading for peace and trying to bring it about? There is no question that such loaded phrases in the Council documents, with no support in Scripture or tradition, have determined the post-conciliar development. On the other hand, there is the assertion that the Council documents, as a whole and interpreted according to Holy Scripture and tradition, stand in unbroken continuity with the tradition of the Church and must, therefore, be considered the guiding principle for the post-conciliar renewal. This is quite unrealistic. The post-conciliar development could only come about thanks to such loaded phrases which were systematically built into the Council documents. In point of fact, the Council documents themselves are a mixture of traditional faith and progressive, new-sounding, loaded phrases presented with a modern theological gist. The post-conciliar development of the Church can be grasped only on the basis of this insight. Were we, for the sake of statistics, to conduct an experiment and determine the import of the Council documents in the light of Assisi, we would ask how many texts could be adduced for or against Assisi. The number of texts directly contradicting or excluding Assisi would far outweigh those in favor. Yet, the few texts in favor of Assisi have marked the Church's path, and specifically through a selective interpretation of the Council documents, combined with a resolute practice of interreligious dialogue. The dangers of selective interpretation of Council texts are manifest. Anyone, according to his own understanding of the Council, can single out a few notions from the whole of the Council documents, which in turn are proclaimed as an expression of the spirit of the Council and made the starting point of a far-reaching Accomodata Renovatio Ecclesiae, thereby creating the possibility to employ Vatican II as the instrument of the total transformation of the Church. If the last council is to be understood merely as an initial thrust, then modern theology becomes a decisive factor for the post-conciliar development of the Church. This becomes clearly evident in the case of interreligious dialogue. Shortly before the council, in theology, a new way of looking at non-Christian religions made a major breakthrough, and this new outlook was at the time in contradiction to the official teaching of the Church. With regard to this changing constellation, Joseph Ratzinger remarked critically in 1966, thus immediately after the council, quote, "In the meantime, a teaching had gained more and more acceptance, although it was previously regarded only as a marginal thesis, namely that God wills and is able to save outside the Church, though, in the end, not without her. Thereby, an optimistic understanding of the world religions was recently brought forth, the consideration of which once again makes clear that not all of the favorite thoughts of modern theology are at the same time biblically sound. For if anything may be called foreign, yes, even opposed to sacred Scripture, then it is the current optimism with regard to the world religions, which, in fact, conceives these religions as means of salvation, a view which can hardly be reconciled with their standing in biblical perspective." End quote. One may indeed say the Council itself has set up the provision, and modern theology has paved the way for the Church to Assisi by its appeal to the spirit of the Council. Faced with the evident contradiction between revelation and tradition on the one side, and the position of the Second Vatican Council in the light of Assisi on the other, everything rests on the question: how did the last council, in the context of modern theology, lead up to the revolutionary change publicly manifested as Assisi?